YouTube videos are hard. It's so much easier to make like a 1-minute TikTok video than a whole 7 or 8 minute YouTube video. But I did promise you guys if last week's video did well, I'd teach you how to put these rope laces in. So that's what we're here to learn today, how to put these rope laces into your shoes. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jake Polino. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Jake Polino. I make shoes on the internet, mainly on those pages, but I'm trying to switch over to YouTube. I've done tutorials on TikTok showing you guys how to put these rope laces into your shoes, but it wasn't very in-depth. So here is a full tutorial on how to do this. This is the only video you need to watch. Disclaimer, I'm not the person who invented this technique. A lot of people think that I did and that people are stealing from me. No, I just made it popular. I'm not sure who the original person is, but whoever that is, shout out to you because a lot of people like this and I love it as well. So let's not waste any more time. Here is the full tutorial on how to put rope laces into your Air Force Ones. First, you need to pick a rope size. You can buy them on Amazon or Joann's. I would suggest Joann's because then you can actually see it in person, but if you can't, that's fine. Both the links are in the description though. The first shoe with rope laces that I did was this one. It's a 4mm lace and it's a little bit too thin for my liking. It's too subtle. It's not very chunky like this one, but some people like that. So if you're going for a thin look that still looks like a lace, but has that rope feel to it, 4mm is a good option. These ones also have the metal lace tips, which I'll show you guys how to do at some point in this video. Moving on to the 6mm rope lace, this is the one that I've used most. Almost every one of the shoes that I've done with rope laces had 6mm rope in it. It's the perfect happy medium for me. It's not too subtle and it's not too overdone as well. So if you're looking for that chunky look, but not too chunky, I would suggest 6mm. And now we're on to the size 10mm rope. This is obviously the biggest rope, but as you can see, it kind of looks similar to these ones. That's because this is a size 17 and these are a size 9. If I were to put the 6mm rope in a size 17 shoe, it would look more like this. It would be too subtle, it would be too thin. If I were to put the 10mm rope into the size 9, it would be chunkier. So it really all comes down to your personal preference and your shoe size. If you're anything below a size 12, I would suggest a 6mm rope or a 4mm rope, depending how chunky you want it. And if you're anything above a 12, I would suggest an 8 or a 10mm rope. But like I said, it's all preference. If you want a subtler look on a size 17, go for a 6mm rope. If you want a bigger look on a size 9, go for a size 10mm rope. It's all personal preference. All right, so after you pick the rope size, you're gonna have to put the ropes into the shoe. There are a few methods for this. I'm gonna show you both that I've used and explain which one's better for which situation. If you're using a 4mm rope or a 6mm rope, I would highly suggest using a hot screwdriver. How do you use a hot screwdriver to put in laces? Well, let me show you.
This is a very simple process. All I do is I stick the screwdriver on the stove, I let it get hot, and then you stab it through the lace holes. There are a few things to worry about with this technique, but they're really not that big a deal. One, there is such a thing as too hot. If you get the screwdriver too hot, there will be too much material that burns off the back of the lace holes. It's really not a big deal because no one will see it, but it's just meh. You'll learn this through trial and error. If there's a lot of smoke coming off of your Air Forces though, I'd probably lower the temperature a little bit. Next, if you stab too deep, you'll accidentally burn the tongue. I did it a little bit here, but it's not a big deal as well because it's all hidden by the laces. Again, not a big deal. Nobody's gonna see it, but still, just try to avoid it. And lastly, this one should go without saying, but don't burn your hand because it does hurt. Now I want to show you the difference between the two holes created by two different techniques. These first holes that I'm pointing at were created by the screwdriver. It's very uniform. They're all the same size. It's clean. It's perfect, really. But like I said, you're not going to be able to get a bigger hole than this. It's only going to be as big as your screwdriver. So if you don't have a huge screwdriver, you're not going to be able to fit the bigger rope laces in it. That's what I created these holes for. These were made with a leather hole punch, and as you can see, they're not very clean, but they're bigger. You can use a Dremel or even a hot screwdriver to even out the holes, but they're really not going to be as nice and uniform as the screwdriver will. You're not going to notice this under the laces, but again, you just want to get the shoe as perfect as it can be.
So I will always suggest the screwdriver method. It's faster, it's easier, it produces a cleaner hole, but the problem is you can't use the screwdriver method with giant ropes like a 10mm or bigger. If you're using one of those bigger ropes and you don't have an enormous screwdriver to stretch out that hole, you're gonna have to go and get a leather hole puncher. They're very easy to find, they're cheap, and I'm gonna show you how to use that now.
Although it's harder than the screwdriver technique, it's not rocket science. You just take the hole punch and you make more circles around the already existing lace hole. It doesn't have to look too clean, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but the one thing you do want to look out for is making the hole too big, because if you make it too big, the laces will fit loosely and you'll see a bunch of jagged edges around the lace holes. After you've made all the holes, I suggest taking a Dremel or sandpaper, whatever it may be, and just evening out the holes to make them look somewhat better. Not necessary, but it'll help you get the laces through and it'll just clean it up a little bit. Now we have all these chewed up up lace holes, and it's time for the hardest part of this custom. The hardest part is actually getting the laces through the shoes. They're so thick that it makes it really hard to pull them through, and this is gonna work all of your hand muscles. Your hands are gonna be cramped up like crazy after this. You wanna measure out the original lace against the rope, and then give yourself like 6, 7, 8 inches away from the tip of the lace, just to give yourself extra room to work with, to leave these loose. Cut it at the spot you want, and then you have to add tape to the end of the rope just to make sure it doesn't unravel, and this will really help you pull it through the shoe. This is a huge tip. Make sure you have half of the tape on the rope and half of it hanging off. You're gonna want to twist the end of that tape that's hanging off of the rope into like a pointy tip, so that way it can go through the hole better. I mean, just look at a regular lace. The tip is much thinner than the rest of the lace, and that's so it's easier to get it through the holes. If you don't do this, you're not gonna be able to get the rope through that hole. It's just not gonna work out. Once you get the laces completely through, you want to go to Home Depot and get some heat shrink tubing. Be very careful that you get the right size. Make sure it's the same size as the rope you're using. I'm using a 10mm rope and a 3/8 inch heat shrink tubing, which equates to about 9.5 millimeters. You got to do some math, but just make sure that they're around the same. With the tape still on the end of the rope, slide the heat shrink tubing over the rope and then measure to where you want it to hang. With these laces, you can't tie your shoes. They're gonna have to be untied and hanging the whole time, so make sure it's not hanging below the sole. You might want to give yourself a little extra length because as you walk, it's gonna loosen up the laces and bring that tip up towards the top of the shoe rather than the sole. I know this shot is awful, but all I did was put super glue inside the end of the heat shrink tubing just to make sure that the lace doesn't slide out. Then you take a lighter or a heat gun, whatever it is, and you heat up the tubing. This will shrink and glue it to the lace and make sure that it doesn't really go anywhere. Heat shrink tubing is the easiest and cheapest way to do this, but you can also put metal tips on the end of the laces.
So if you want those metal lace tips, you're gonna have to go out and buy something like this. Get copper if you can because it's much easier to cut, but I like the gold finish, so I went with these. And you also need a pipe cutter, and yes, I know this is made for copper, but it will eventually cut through the brass fittings. It takes a while and some elbow grease, but it works.
Only do this if you really want that metal tip. It's a lot of extra time and a lot of extra work, but it's a really nice addition and it gives the shoes a luxury feel. Be aware that no matter what you put on the end of these laces, you're probably not going to be able to untie the shoes. If you put the heat shrink tubing on, then you're probably going to be able to take them out, but it might take the heat shrink tubing with it or it might scrunch it up. If you use the metal tips and you glue them on correctly, you're not going to be able to take those laces out without cutting them. It's just not going to easily fit back through the hole. To get these metal tips, all you do is put the fitting inside the pipe cutter and then you turn the pipe cutter around the fitting a bunch of times until it eventually cuts it in half. This takes about 10 to 20 minutes and it's a very hard job. It's hard to cut through that brass, especially with something made to cut copper. And then once you finally get it in half, you have to get the laces on, and it's way harder to get the laces through this than it is the heat shrink tubing. So make sure if you want these that you really want them.
That's it. That's all there is to it. In conclusion, use the screwdriver technique when you can, but if you have big laces, you're probably going to need a leather hole punch. Think about the size of your shoe. If you have a shoe that's a size 17, you're gonna need bigger rope laces. If you have a size 9 or something normal like that, you can just get away with a 6mm rope. But it depends how chunky you want it. It's personal preference. So follow my Instagram and my TikTok at Jake Polino, but please subscribe to this channel first. I do post a lot on my TikTok and my Instagram, but I'm trying to switch over to YouTube full time and I need your help to do that. So please hit the subscribe button. Leave a like, leave a comment if you like the video. That's it. Now you know how to put rope laces into your shoes. Be safe with this. Have fun. Create something cool. If you do create something cool, tag me on Instagram. That way I can share it. But that's it. Thank you guys for watching.